Okay, hello. My name is Miriam Malake, and I've been trying to make this video over and over and over again and saying, like, oh, I'm going to come back and edit it and post it at a different time, but I realize I'm constantly bugging people about this stuff, and so for right now, it doesn't really do any harm about posting a rambling video about it, and one day I will choose to or not choose to um, make a better video of it, explaining it more in depth without all of my crazy ramblings. Um, I lost 100 pounds. Um, Technically, I've lost and gained and lost and gained and lost and gained lots of weight. You know, um, at my peak weight, while I was like when I was pregnant, I was 250. Um, and I was eating very unhealthily during that time, and I was very stressed. Mm. And looking back on all those times, it makes sense. I wasn't able to eat pretty much throughout the whole day while I was pregnant because I was so sick from my pregnancy and from my anxiety and any type of smell. Even thinking about, even hearing the word of cauliflower used to make me vomit. Quite literally, I drove my family insane, but that doesn't matter. I couldn't eat throughout the day, and then at nighttime, whenever I was home and all of that in my own home, I was able to eat. I took Zofran for that. That actually doesn't have much of a point. What I was eating sometimes, I one time I ordered just donuts, and I ate a bunch of donuts. I threw out those donuts. uh, I lost 100 pounds. I had lost about a little bit here and there, kind of over time, but the majority of my weight loss has been in the last 6 months. In the last 6 months, because I was really trying to work on and understand my mental health issues. I had gone from living in Texas, working as a district manager at a job that I had been at for a decade. And I had decided to trust my now partner um, to like pay all the bills and stuff and and let me be home and homeschool because homeschooling is very important to me because I'm a worrier. I worry all the time. That was part of my mental health issues. I wanted to be able to not worry so much and not live in fear all the time. And I was always so scared. And one day I got really sick during this transition. So sick that I was in the ER a couple times, just because I wasn't able to hold anything down or anything in. Um, and I was like living in the restroom. During this time, I was about 50 pounds heavier. I had already lost about 50 pounds with all the running and dieting and doing all the things, doing all those diets, uh, doing keto, trying vegan a little bit. Um, and I know that this is how a lot of people have done it because these were the fad diets. This is a lot of people's story with weight loss, and and I carried a lot of my weight in my stomach, and in my neck and stuff. Uh, but people just never really seemed to notice whenever I gained a lot of weight. They knew that I was heavier, but the people around me saw me all the time. That's neither here nor there, because sometimes you kind of want people to be like, hey, how come you didn't tell me about this change in me? Because I had pretty consistently been at about, and these numbers don't matter. Like, I had just been heavier. I'd been heavier my whole life. I had been considered obese since I mean, the first time I was sent to the doctor about my diet, I was about 10 years old. They said I was pre-diabetic, and they put me on the sugar-free diet. And my mom was like, she's not going to go without anything. So she went and bought she wanted to make sure I had all the desserts, all the things. And I didn't lose weight or anything. I just was on sugar free for a while, and then I stopped doing that. Then, of course, through teenage years, there's always like, okay, I developed early, so I was like, kind of just always like a grown woman body, even though I was a kid. Since I was like third grade, I had a lot going on. Um, so I dealt with my weight my whole life. I'd been trying to lose weight my whole life. I was in tennis and swimming specifically just so I could lose weight because I was heavier. Um, I was shopping in the plus size sections and all of that, and that didn't bother me. I just wanted clothes that fit me and didn't squish my body. Over these past 6 months, I was really trying to focus on my mental health. And part of my mental health issues was I no longer wanted to cook the way that I used to. I used to love cooking. I was so excited to cook. I loved baking. Baking was my favorite thing to do. Because baking is like almost the closest thing to chemistry that you can do in the home if you're not using a recipe and you're just trying to figure it out. I loved baking. And I had stopped loving baking. I had stopped loving cooking. Whenever I would, you know, cook anything, it would make me nauseous. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was taking a pregnancy test all the time, even though I wasn't worried about being pregnant. I was just like, I don't know. What is going on? Why am I feeling this way? So I tried some of those diets again. I had heard, oh gosh, what is her name? Is it Michaela Peterson? Peterson's daughter has an autoimmune issue, and she had gone down to eating pretty much meat, salt, and water. And so I was like, okay, let me try that. And the first time I tried it, like it was miraculous, and it went really well for me. Um, but then by the time I tried it again later on, after I had been sick, it just didn't work right for me. I was just constantly trying to eat meat all day, every day. And I was still just sick. My stomach was not okay. Like I was anxious all the time. But I didn't give it that much of a chance because I had probably given it 3 weeks this time. But I couldn't do it. I still just had a terrible relationship with food. So I was like, you know what? I went on TikTok. I was desperate. And I asked, what's up with this? Like, how come I don't want to eat? And it's like kind of, and I'm like, and it's according to my period. This is whenever I don't want to eat. This is whenever I'm okay with eating and all of that. And somebody responded saying that I might have PCOS. And I was like, there's no way. I don't have any signs or symptoms of PCOS. But then I went and looked up the symptoms of PCOS and signs of PCOS. And apparently, you know, having a short period is a sign of PCOS. And I've always had a short period. 3 days is usually what my thing is. I have a 3 day period. That's a lot of information. But that's what I got. And and I always had really bad acne along my jaw. And I was like, I haven't been bloated. I don't have any. I don't have an apple shape or anything like that. But turns out a little bit. I found out that I did. I just didn't realize it because of what is above my belly. Um, so she recommended a fruit smoothie drink. Just have something because there were times when I just was having no calories. And what's crazy is that during this time, I was not really losing weight. I had so much stress on me. I had so much cortisol in my body that my body was holding on so intelligently to all the fat that it could because it had no idea what was going on. I was losing my mind. Like it really, I was so worried. I had started seeing a counselor. I saw a psychiatrist, and they gave me pills to try. And those pills, my issue with anxiety is I was triggered by my stomach pain. And then they gave me pills that gave me stomach pain, that gave me the symptoms, nausea, diarrhea, that I was having whenever I'm sick, when I'm so anxious that I'm sick. These are the dots that I'm connecting. And so I didn't do it. And that doesn't happen with everybody. Some people, they get through that first month, and then they, like, those symptoms subside and all of that. And it is miraculous for them. Just in my case, it wasn't. Eventually, after trying all the diets, I had been dabbling in being gluten free, and I was like, you know what? Let me just go all in on gluten free because my cousin Tiffany called me, or she sent me a voicemail or something saying that she had a dream that she held up a box of cereal and she's like, "Don't eat this, don't eat this." And she was like, I don't remember what it was, like honey bunches of oats or something. She's like, I don't know. She couldn't remember what it was. But then, some cereal has gluten in it, some cereal doesn't. And so I was like, you know what? I just take that as a sign, no gluten. Because I believe my cousin is a mystic. And so I stopped eating gluten and I started taking it very seriously. And in the first week, I lost like almost like 5 pounds. For me, that's a lot. Because sometimes it would take me like 2 months to lose 2 pounds. Um, Not only had I lost weight though, the top of my stomach, like right at my rib cage, flattened out. My whole life I had had kind of like a round belly. Like I have a barrel cage, rib barrel chest. Um, and so I kind of just thought that's how I was shaped. Even whenever I was a little kid, I had this kind of like big belly, like long skinny legs, and a big belly. And that belly went away because I stopped eating gluten. I mean, I had started taking a probiotic too, and fiber as well, because I was trying to do all the things. I was also doing a lot of meditation practices to help with my anxiety. I was going to counseling so that I could talk through. I was doing talk counseling. I am doing talk counseling. I was doing all of the things that I could think of to help improve my mental health. So it wasn't just gluten free. It wasn't just going gluten free. That's what I thought. Until, one day my mental health issues really came back, and I couldn't really figure out why. And it was for about a month. It was right around the holidays, and I was like, gosh, is it just because I can't be around my family anymore? Like, my mom has been my best friend. I love these people, and all of a sudden I wasn't enjoying the holidays anymore. And it wasn't because I wasn't looking forward to it, it's because I was scared. I couldn't like talk to people about certain subjects because I was like, no, I just don't, I can't. I couldn't deal. And so, I continued still going gluten free. I was like, this is probably just a phase with hormones and all that because, sometimes people they just have these issues. And we have to just figure it out. So I was being patient with myself because those are part of the practices of meditation and kindness, and not even that, just being observing, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to stop talking about it because I don't really quite understand it. So I went to go get a snack one day, one of my usual snacks, and they are seasoned fries. And some of you may know how seasoned fries are made, like what people like at a restaurant traditionally would call seasoned fries, like Arby's fries. Those are those are made with flour, and I went to go grab these fries, and like I had a flash of how they're made because I have made them before. I used to cook all the time. And during this time, I hadn't really been cooking. I'm like, let me just put something in the freezer. Let me just get something in my stomach. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I had put them away in a Ziploc bag, rolled away. So the ingredients were tucked behind all this plastic. So I was trying to open it. And it's in the winter. So I'm like, I must be like depressed and anxious because it's the winter time. I don't have enough sun. I don't have all that. And there it is, wheat on the bag. Wheat. That's gluten. And so I kind of like had to re-detox. It took me about a week, but that was just for the first signs. But and then there were a few other times where I had been on the tried and true gluten-free trail. And then something would happen. I would use a seasoned packet, and I didn't realize. I mean, I did. It's like it was somewhere in the back of my head, but I was like, let me just throw a roast in there in the crock pot and let it cook and throw this season packet in there because I just don't feel like it today because this was around the time that I had eaten, like, I just wasn't feeling it, and that had flour in it. And so I had to like make the commitment, like, I only eat stuff that I know the exact ingredients in. Things like even in yellow cheese, that no cheese is naturally yellow. My partner knows this because he was a deli man. Um, but no cheese is naturally yellow. They add annatto into it. And technically, annatto is not gluten, but it is the husk around wheat. I don't know how that can be true, but I do know that when I'm lactose intolerant, I'm fine. I could eat a bunch of cottage cheese, probably an unhealthy amount. But if I eat any cheddar cheese or anything like that, I just And this was before I knew about gluten. This was just how my body used to react to things. I was still gonna eat my cheese, god damn it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should go dairy free probably, and we're that's another day. Look, I've already cut out and have been diligent about one thing, and I think that it's hard to talk to people about food and their diet because and their nutrition because of how touchy our society has made it, not necessarily the people who are receiving it, but how the people have had been talked to about it. I've been that person. I've been the one who's talked to doctors and they're like, okay, well, you need to lose weight. or or whenever you're saying, hey, I need to focus on my nutrition, and then they don't really help you because they don't hear that part. Over here, I finally found a doctor, and she gave me some bomb probiotics that you can buy over the counter. And they're refrigerated pills, so I don't know. I'll be like, here you go, I guess. I don't know. I'll put it in the description. Because she listened. And she's like, oh, okay. This will help with your digestive system. And it did. It did. And it does. But after I had been sufficiently glutened and unglutened, I had done enough like real bad science and been the test subject myself on accident. This was never on purpose. I have never, well, one time I took a tiny taste of a beer that sounded interesting, um, but that was a drop on my tongue because I don't need a lot to taste something because now I care to taste stuff again. I eat so much more food than I have ever really been allowed to eat. I can eat probably too much now, but I still lose weight. And I've been to the doctor. I've made sure that I'm healthy and that there's not any other cause to my weight loss because I haven't been working out. I have been sitting and writing, publishing a book, and editing YouTube videos and watching a lot of YouTube videos and reading books and watching a lot of YouTube videos. You know, I sit in a chair and I do a lot of PC gaming, and I lost this weight simply by cutting out something that was quite honestly inflaming the bowels inside of me. And the stomach and the mind are so closely connected. It's like the stomach has its own brain, essentially. The stomach can taste if something is spicy or salty. And there were times when I was glutened and I took a bite of something and I was eating it and my stomach went just for a little bit, just for a second, like just like nothing, like I wasn't like, oh, my stomach. But it was just like a, oh, that was a thing. And then I didn't listen to it. And then I would get pimples. And then the next day my stomach would swell. And then and then I would usually get a little constipated. I know you don't want to know this, but this is how it would happen. And so I started paying attention that anytime I suspected being glutened, of how my body would change. And then sometimes I would like get a little bit depressy, you know? I'm gonna say depressy because I've been depressed, you know? And so it's just like a little tad of like, meh, but not as bad, not near even like a fraction of what it had been. And even my anxiety was just like every once in a while, I was just like, hey, what about? And I'm like, okay, guys. Because this also came from other practices of like trying to keep calm and other practices to keep me from being too anxious. talking to myself nicely, talking to myself in a loving way, all of that also helps. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, I stopped eating gluten. I stopped eating wheat, barley, and rye. And so that's why I'm doing good. It was a combination. I had to focus on my whole biosocial wellness wheel. I did. And part of that is nutrition and spirituality, you know, all that fun stuff. And that's what I did. I focused on those things, and that really has helped with my with myself about these things. This is a very touchy subject because it is mental health, and it is a very personal relationship. For me, it's gluten, but yours it might be bananas. You know, this is a personal relationship. This is a personal conversation, and yes, doctors can help. Like if you have the ability and the access to a nutritionist or somebody who can actually run your intolerances, that's very important. For example, I have a nickel allergy. I'm allergic to nickel. Anytime I get have any bad nickel or any nickel jewelry, that messes me up. That's on the outside. That's on my skin. Imagine how that is directly inside of us. And that is crazy because like anything in a tin can, high in nickel. Anything that like beans, wheat, whole grain oats. Now that can be alleviated if you have issue. For me, that's an issue because I have problems absorbing iron. So I would take iron supplements, but I really only had issue absorbing iron because my intestines were inflamed. My whole digestive system was unhappy. And if it was running properly and things weren't constantly on fire, then it would have been able to do better at absorbing the heavy metals that we're supposed to have. Oh, other things that show up whenever I have gluten. So I have acne, I have depression and anxiety. I get dry skin, similar to eczema, like on my hands and on my back. I get bloating, and I have trouble with my movements, my bowel movements. The following cycle that I have, the actual menstruation. For me as a woman, this is important. For somebody who has a uterus that menstruates, it's important for people to know that it changes that. Like that week for me prior was ramped up. So when you go and look at like allergies or go to like an allergen doctor, a lot of the questions that they'll ask if what those allergies do to you. Um, and when I went to a neurologist, they asked what those allergies do to me. And one of those things was depression and anxiety. And it's not something that people talk about often. So, like, even if somebody were to get bit by or like stung by a bee and they were allergic and then they had the EpiPen, of course, there's the side effects of going through anaphylaxis and having an EpiPen as well. But just to give like an extreme example, depression and anxiety may follow those things. Because of just like the huge ramp up of hormones and stress hormones. Uh, if you have those things right now, like acne on your jaw, that isn't like regular acne. That is like that's kind of like deep. and it hurts. Like, because there are some pimples that you can get and are kind of like poppable. I just don't want to talk about, like, because I mess with my face. I have had acne since since I was 11. It started on my forehead, moved to my cheeks, and then to my jaw. So I've had acne. I've picked at my face for a long time in order to actually like get rid of things to make my skin smooth because anyway. But there were always certain pimples that couldn't be taken care of. And they were all right here. I'm not a scientist, but I have done a lot of research. I'm not giving medical advice or diet advice or what to eat advice, but how I believe the science works of it, as not to necessarily why gluten affects us, because that's a bigger conversation, and then I'll sound super like foil hat if we talk about that. Um, when your bowels are inflamed, it kind of is sending, like, it's kind of like screaming in the background always. It's quiet, but it's still horror. But it's in the background and it's kind of quiet. So there's just a little bit of stress hormone of cortisol just kind of being of not necessarily adrenaline, but cortisol just kind of being dripped all the time at these little pulses of inflammation. So in our actual nervous system, in our actual brain, where the chemicals are being kind of distributed, it is just also just a little bit of cortisol, more than usual, because your body's stressed. And we learn to live with our pains. We learn to live with these things because nobody's pegging it. Nobody's getting it right away. And if somebody come if a patient goes into a doctor's office and they say that they're constipated, if they're able to and their insurance is able to and all of that, of course, because that's the whole, they should be given a referral to a food intolerance specialist, a food allergen, or an allergen doctor. And so they should get tested. I don't know if it's going to show up on necessarily what it is, but if you are allergic to things, those are smart things to avoid. And most people don't realize that they have any allergy because they're not going into anaphylaxis. They're getting other little things in response as an allergy, as an intolerance, because there isn't histamines being released because of it. We're not allergic to it. It's an intolerance. Our body just does not vibe with it. But I notice whenever I am super gluten free and everything's good, my body's able to vibe with the other stuff I wasn't able to, because the main source issue that had this domino effect on all of my nutrition throughout my entire life had been a constant, had been a staple carb for me. I love bread. I love baking. I love pastries. I love croissants. I love danishes. I like hostess cakes. I love it. I love them. And so it sounds like I had to give up so much stuff. And I didn't. Because when I was eating those things, I could only eat so much and then I would be miserable and unable to eat. And I would still like, and what do they say when your stomach's upset? Have a piece of plain toast. I don't know why they're British, but they say it, and they're British. And they say have a bit of plain toast. And when that's the one thing that's really hurting you, and then my response is, ah, but I ate the plain toast. The journey is far more complex, and there's a lot of other things, and it took a long time for me to really get this down and to really get to the point where I have it down to a science in my own body with my own experiences. Um, in comparison to the lifetime that led up to this. So going back and reviewing my life and realizing all this time that I had been beating myself up about how come I'm not losing weight. I'm at night doing 100 jumping jacks every night before bed, doing 100 crunches, doing all this working out because I wanted to lose the weight so bad because I hated the way that it was shaped, and I was so mean to myself. My acne, my dry skin, all the things that I had chosen to demean myself for, even though I'm beautiful. I've been beautiful at every size. My soul is amazing, and none of that mattered. But when I was a teenager, that stuff really mattered, and it really was a knock to my self confidence. Not because I was overweight, not because I had acne, because I like to solve problems, and I was not able to solve that problem for that whole time. And it had been a constant in my life from at least 10 years old. I had been active. I was always running around outside. I was always playing sports, but I was not losing weight. I was able to reach other goals. I was always able to accomplish things, and those were one of the things that I struggled with. Unless, of course, it was an unhealthy habit where I was heartbroken, so I couldn't eat, and I was throwing up from being so anxious and sad. And the main thing I used to drink at that time was like breakfast essentials, which isn't gluten kosher, and I would get sick. And looking back and being able to talk to young Miriam, to teenage Miriam, and say, hey, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. Your thing might not be gluten, but if you see any type of like resonation, of course, I don't know if resonation is the right word, but if anything kind of seems familiar, I would recommend it. And my advice is like, make sure if you're doing it, you do it. And it's not the there are gluten-free sweets, there are gluten, just put type gluten-free in and make sure it's gluten-free and see the options that you have. Rice, corn, potatoes, um, buckwheat, um, beans. Those are at least five things that are all great instead instead of it. And you'll be surprised at how many things are gluten free. And it isn't that crazy. A lot of people don't know what gluten is. So a lot of people are like, if I go to a restaurant and I say, hey, um, is there any gluten in this? They'll be like, there's rice. And I'm like, that's fine. And so then I'll just be like, anything with wheat, barley, or rye. So any type of flour of any kind. So I have to really break it down. Most people don't know what it is. And a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, just eat regular food. And I am eating regular food. I don't have to eat anything crazy. I don't have to do anything crazy. But I'm also blessed to be able to afford food that is an alternative right now. But I think that putting this out here will help people know about it, and it'll spread and it'll get there, because there are, even from the time that I started till now, there are so many more gluten-free options. There are so many great gluten-free recipes. Um, if you really love sandwiches, there are gluten-free breads, but I would recommend making your own rice bread. Oh, So good. Rice bread is delicious. It does take a little bit of a science, but I'm a baker, so I don't mind doing that science. Um, but yes, right, you can make some rice bread in 2 hours. Um, but also it's a learning curve because it's a different type of baking. Uh, Either way, you should try it if you have anything that seems to resonate with what kind of happened with me in my body. And I wish you luck. If it's not gluten, it might be apples. If it's not apples, and and if you have PCOS, these hormones, all of these hormones are affected by each other. So if we have high cortisol, the way that our estrogen and our progesterone and our testosterone and all this ends up moving around in our bodies could really affect our actual sex hormones and also cause um, things that are similar to PCOS. Or I truly believe that I have been at like pre PCOS and I was able to kind of reverse it so that I my hormones are doing what it's supposed to do. I've had slip ups though, and I notice how my menstrual cycle changes during those slip ups. And this is just a theory. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a person who lived a life and discovered this thing. Not discovered it. Gluten free's been around. Celiac disease is a very big deal, but discovered it for themselves, like how radical the change is. Um, like if I were looking at myself, even 6 months ago, even gosh, I want to rock climb now. I have been going do 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 do, going all around, and like even hearing all the things that I do now would have caused me to have an anxiety attack. Then it is crazy the energy that I have, the the joy and the serenity that I have, and I think that's just incredibly valuable. And but I have had to sacrifice some stuff. Like I do not allow myself to eat out anywhere unless it is a certified gluten-free place. That's a new rule because I have eaten at other places and each time they just don't get it right and I'm the one who pays the price and I can't do that to myself anymore. So I have had to give that up. If a place has a gluten free option, but it still serves anything with gluten, like flour at all, like if it's a pizza place and they have a gluten free crust, that gluten free crust is still going to be moving in the same stoves and on the same countertops as those flour crusts. And so, even having that in me, I have it has bothered me. And if I have a sauce, just a smidge of a sauce with a little bit of gluten in it, it upsets my stomach and the whole phase starts over again. There has been too many there's been too many tests and I have been the test subject on it each time because I wasn't diligent about it. So just if you are going to do it, be diligent about it. It's your own relationship though with the diet because that's a freaking it even has die in the word. But in your nutrition. And that comes with I don't want to say relapse, but it comes with a little bit of relapse. It just kind of happens. And each time so if you try it and then this thing happens or if and things mess up and you realize that you've had this, it's validation is what I saw it as and how it felt is that this really is affecting me. And this really has been the thing that's been affecting me my whole life. You have a good time and a good day and night. and you. And Merry Christmas.